highly unsatisfied with your health care, then let's give you choices. Let's give you an options, including a public plan that you could enroll in and sign up for. That's been my proposal.
Now that conforms to a longer-term strategy. It's a strategy that the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, has attached herself to as well. In March 2009, before Congress, she stressed a new definition of reiterating the supposed public plan option, which is what they're now calling it.
I'm a believer in, and certainly the President is a believer in, is that competition often is a very healthy component of any market situation. So in the design of a health insurance exchange, which is really what we're talking about, and what the President discusses, a choice of a variety of options is often critical.
The question is, where does the idea of this public plan of the government competing with private insurance companies come from? It comes from the next speaker, a man named Jacob Hacker, whom you'll find all over YouTube saying just what you hear here, that the public plan, as it's called, is a strategy to crowd out private plans through the subsidized power of the government to attract people, just like they started to do with the Children's Health Insurance Plan, which, as I mentioned in Monday's podcast, pulled a lot of parents away from their private health plans for their own kids and inspired them to take the less expensive, taxpayer-subsidized government plan that was competing with them. This is from April 2009 at a meeting for ourfuture.org.
So what I'm arguing for is a system in which both public and private plans are, with their unique strengths and weaknesses, are able to coexist side by side so that all Americans, not just the elderly or the poor, have access to the distinctive strengths of a public health insurance plan as well as the strengths of private plans.
And there's more. We'll get back to him in a minute. Representative Jan Schakowsky is next, and she is quite striking to hear. She's a Democratic congresswoman from, yeah, you got it, Illinois, and her statement from April 18, 2009 starts to say it all.
And next to me was a guy from the insurance company who then argued against the public health insurance option, saying it wouldn't let private insurance compete, that a public option will put the private insurance industry out of business and leave
We'll get back to her in a minute. Now let's go back to the conceit of Jacob Hacker, who reveals more and says the government will let you keep your private insurance if your employer continues to provide it. Oh, isn't that nice? Well, guess what that means? First, that the individual market for individual insurance policies is a target. It will be destroyed. Watch out if you buy your own. And it also tells us that the government will begin to target businesses with new programs. You can bet on it, and seduce them to move to government plans even as their own plans shoot up in cost. Now, why will they shoot up in cost? Yeah, they're going to go up due to exactly what you're starting to hear now. Talk about revoking the tax exemptions for businesses to write off their insurance expenses, the very thing in the 1970s that Ted Kennedy started in order to exclude people who bought their private plans, i.e., so that they couldn't claim it on their taxes. Remember how everything was shifted towards the HMOs? Well, the government now wants to do to the large group business insurance market what Ted Kennedy inspired to get insurance away from individual issuing in the first place. So, first they kill individual markets, then they kill the group market that they helped inspire through tax policy 30 years ago. It's a very, very swift game they're playing, everybody. Very deft. And, of course, here he is.
Someone once said to me, this is a Trojan horse for single payer. And I said, well, it's not a Trojan horse, right? It's just right there. I'm telling you, we're going to get there. over time, slowly, but we'll move away from reliance on employment-based health insurance, as we should, but we'll do it in a way that we're not going to frighten people into thinking they're going to lose their private insurance. We're going to give them a choice of public and private insurance when they're in the pool, and we're going to let them keep their private employment-based insurance if their employer continues to provide it.
Now, let's wrap it up with Representative Schakowsky once more as she confirms everything we're hearing.
This is not a principled fight. This is a fight about strategy for getting there, and I believe we will.
And finally, Barack Obama.
As Congress moves forward on health care legislation in the coming weeks, there are going to be different ideas and disagreements about how to achieve this goal, and I welcome all ideas. We've got to have a good debate. What I will not welcome, I will not accept, is endless delay or denial that reform needs to happen.
And I think what I'd like to do is allow Glenn Beck to finish this off, because he and his staff did a lot of work in addition to the really, really good people at Verisum.com. So let's hear what he has to say.
You know, I've told you for a while now that this is, I mean, did you notice some of the names involved here, especially the Tides Foundation? Tides Foundation, gee, we know them because they bailed out Acorn. There are people and forces behind some of these things, and it is a completely dishonorable debate because they're not telling you the truth. I'm sorry. We're not listening to the truth. They are telling us, and you just saw what's coming our way.
Pretty interesting stuff, isn't it? I think it's very revealing, and it's very clear what they're trying to do. Anybody who understands economics knows what these people are doing, and they've got the power to manipulate this system. All we can do is observe what they've also noticed, but they're acting on it. They're doing it. They're enacting the plan. They've been doing this for a long, long time, and the end game is coming. So watch out, my friends. It's pretty scary stuff. And remember, we already have the Federal Coordinating Council, which was slid into the stimulus bill a couple months ago. That one is that open-ended set of lines that will allow the federal government to dictate savings on private health providers. That way they can get into the private health providers even if they don't get this single-payer system passed. A couple things I want to mention. It's very clear right now as I finish this up that I'm going to separate this issue from the financial issue. I think the financial regulations issue is going to have to stand on its own. It is huge. It is so involved. It requires a lot of economic analysis. So that one is going to be its own stand-up pod on its own. This one will stand on its own as well as a big chunk for you for information, and I hope it's worthwhile. So we're going to split these off so that it's easier to digest them and they're easier to listen to, and you can hold each one separately on each issue. I've realized that as I'm going through this now. I've already got some information that we've recorded about the financial issue. That will come out tomorrow. Now, there's another thing I want to mention. I just received a phone call from Judd Gregg's office in Washington, D.C. We're hoping to talk to Senator Gregg about his plan. Well, now Senator Gregg is involved in the debate about Barack Obama's plan. It's currently being debated in the Senate for costs. I love that irony. The senators debating costs. Great. Like they're real consumers, Anyway, so he's currently in and out of the Senate right now as they do the markups, they call this, on this bill to find out how much all this stuff would cost, which is just ridiculous anyway. But so we're expecting a call from him either today or tomorrow. And I am going to definitely ask him some questions about this Obama plan. I'm going to let him sound off on this thing. I think a lot of his analysis on it will be very sound. However, we're going to have to call him to task on his plan because he's touting that as an alternative to not grow the size of government. And clearly, it is not an alternative that does not grow the size of government. It expands government. So his option is a bad option. It's anti-constitutional. It's anti-freedom. And we're going to have to ask him questions on that. So I'm really looking forward to this. Cross your fingers that we get the call either today or tomorrow. In the meantime, before I leave, I want to remind you, I've got one gigantic piece of audio that will be coming to you, and it is one of the most revealing pieces of audio that you can find out there. It's the head of Blue Cross Blue Shield of California, and it really shows you the corporatist leftist mindset that is out there among particularly the people in Blue Cross Blue Shield and some other very large companies that will gain an advantage if the government starts to take over. It's very interesting to see how some of these people who are involved with the semi-government, semi-private sphere want the government to take over more because they know it's going to be to their advantage. Incredible to hear what this guy says. I'll put that out all as one segment. Before I leave now, I want to give you some very good sound that comes from an ABC online show that's on every day, every Monday through Friday, I should say, at noontime. It's called Top Line. And the hosts do a pretty good job sort of laying out some of the issues, and they have an excellent guest on. His name is Rick Scott. And Rick Scott is with Conservatives for Patients' Rights. Rick Scott would probably be with me in about 95% of everything. I wish he would be a little stricter on the Constitution as a so-called conservative. And don't forget, this is coming from me who thinks the Constitution doesn't go far enough in protecting my freedoms. So listen to what Mr. Scott